Hello and welcome to your weekly roundup of all the latest news and general ramble about the world of electric cars from the gang at electrifying.com. And this week we will be talking about comebacks and when they are not always a good idea. Plus, of course, we'll be dipping into the postbag to hear what you've had to say and answering all your car buying questions. Welcome to the Kilowatt half hour. I'm Ginny.
I'm Vicky.
And I'm Tom.
Well, hello and welcome, gang. Welcome back. So it's Friday, end of what has seemed like another busy week, although not busy in comparison to the weeks that have been before us because they've been on another level. What have you all been driving this week? Tom, have you driven anything interesting this week?
I haven't driven anything really interesting this week. I've just been sat here at my desk, beavering away.
Driving your desk, indeed.
Yeah,
Vic, anything interesting to...
Well,
are we all a bit card out now after the last few weeks?
So, I actually drove the Alpha Junior recently.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Go
was
on.
good fun.
Yeah.
So, that was, to be precise, the Junior Veloce, which is kind of confusing because Alpha sort of ranks that as a trim level, but actually it's a bit like it is to the Alpha Junior what the GTI is to the Golf. It is quite a different thing to the standard Alpha Juniors, and we've only driven that performance one, which gets different suspension, a mechanical diff, much more power, all of that stuff.
Bigger price tag?
Bigger price tag, lower range. So you're talking, nearly £43,000, I think, for the Veloce, and we're talking about a car here that's, not really. It was about the same size as, like a Vauxhall Mocha. It's that kind of thing. It's not huge, so I really, really like it. I don't know if I love the looks of it, but I love the way it drives. The Veloce is really good. I was really, really taken with how it drives. But I am also very conscious that we've only driven that range topper, and most people obviously are going to go for the more sort of standard one, which of course Alpha tells us is also brilliant to drive. But I'm, that's kind of what they're paid to tell us. So I will wait until we've actually driven it ourselves, I think.
Just the way Ford is paid to tell us that their new SUV is a Capri, but more and more on that later. Everybody, that is why we're here. So Nikki went out and drove that as well, and I think she liked it very much. There is a video of that on the YouTube channel right now. So what have I been driving? I've actually been in a Renault Scenic for the last couple of weeks, which I didn't love at first. Shocker. Because you guys on your European Car of the Year made it your Car of the Year, didn't you, Vicky?
We did. Yeah, we really liked the Scenic. I think it's to do with the range and the price, and I like the entertainment, and it's just one of those all-round really good electric cars. I have to be, I'm a little bit, I was not as positive about it initially as a lot of other people. I sort of felt like maybe it was, it annoyed me that the boot was a weird shape and this kind of thing. But I have to say, having driven it up against pretty much all of it, all of its rivals, I do think as a package, it's pretty much one of the best family electric cars out there for the price and the range and the tech and stuff. It is great.
I think that's what I got my head around. Initially, I found it, the steering's way too light for me, and I had to really play around with it. So I've got to have it in, I've got to have it in my own perso setting, as they call it, perso, which makes me want to vomit every time I press the perso button for my personal setting that I've set up on my personal car. I've actually I've really kind of grown, or it's grown on me the more I've driven it. And I have just done two 5-hour drives in it, one last night and one on Wednesday down to Wales. And it's actually really comfy and again, efficient actually. And I know it's much warmer weather at the moment, but I've been doing motorway driving for the bulk of that. And I was getting around 320 miles.
Oh, that's great.
Which was pretty good on a full battery. Couple of things though that I can't get my head around. And overall, I do agree with you. I think it is actually a very good family car. I absolutely loathe where the gear selector is, and I can't start to like it. So the gear selector is on a stalk at the top of the steering wheel. Whether it's how I hold the steering wheel, the size of my hands, I just don't know. But I always feel like I have to reach a bit too far, like I'm trying to reach to get it. And also it's just a bit of a faff when you're doing a 3-point turn or a 5-point turn, as you do on little Welsh country lanes. it's just I really don't like that, and it feels a bit flimsy. It feels like something that might snap off in my hand if I tugged it too much. I didn't like that. I agree the infotainment system is great, but there is one incredibly lazy bit, and I took a photograph of it, and I'm trying to find the picture now, which if I'd have been better organised, I would have had it. I can't find it. But basically, if you haven't turned it off completely, the little warning comes up to you to tell you to turn the car off completely, and it says, turn off engine. It's like, no, it doesn't have an engine, Ren. It's so lazy. Surely that can't be that complex a software update that you can't change the warning sign to not say turn off engine. But that irritates me. I think it's lazy.
You're
Am I
as
being
much of a
grumpy,
pedant as
Tom?
I am about that kind of thing.
I know, and you are the true pedant. I don't know, Tom. Have you driven it? You haven't driven it yet, have
Yeah,
you?
I have driven it. I drove it briefly when we were doing some filming, and there's one thing what you're
Oh,
talking
yeah,
about, that stalk. And I think I did a 3-point turn as well. And it wasn't just that you're not used to where it is or it's a bit of an awkward position. It's when you make that kind of move, it just takes a fraction of a second to go from
love.
reverse to drive and back again, which seems like crazy. I mean, it's probably a second or half a second. But when you're doing a 3-point turn somewhere a little bit iffy, or somebody's waiting for you in a car park, that fraction of a second is enough to irritate me or just make me panic a little bit.
Exactly what he
I agree,
said.
actually.
What he said too. We both agree with that. And the button it
Yeah, I
has
think
is
we all agree.
this. It's,
One thing,
we all agree. Active engine, switch off. It says. I found my photograph. Active engine, switch
Yeah.
off. No,
that
it's
is
so
annoying.
lazy.
On this
But
subject,
then,
one thing that really
so,
annoys me about the Renault as well, sorry Ginny, is just, I've
no,
got to
no,
say this, because whenever I sit in a modern Renault, it really annoys me that they've not just got the gear selector there, and the cruise control controls, and the volume and media stuff, so you've got like 3 massive stalks, and your indicators as well, so you've got all of these stalks, all on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, and you're kind of there going, and it's really easy to do the kind of cruise control instead of your volume or something, which is it's all a bit like, there's too much all on that right-hand side of the steering wheel, I think, and it's not just scenic as well. It's in is it the Arcana as well? This kind of
yeah,
thing. So I don't
it's their
like that,
Renault.
but
I completely agree. It's their setup. There's too much going on, and I wonder if maybe actually you've kind of made me think there because it is all on the right hand side, and I'm left-handed. So naturally, this just isn't my hand that I'm kind of more agile with, and it just and completely, it's that slight lag. But having said that, it does have a lot going for it. We're being pedantic because that's what you want us to be, isn't it? That's what we're here for.
absolutely, I love the scenic. It's generally good, but yeah, I'll
It
forgive it
is
that.
good. It is good. So what else has been going? Oh, we've got a great video which has just landed. If you haven't seen it this morning, Nicola has been out to drive the Dacia Spring, and I think we are all very happy to hear from Nicola that it's as good as we wanted it to be, which was
Yeah.
very, very good news.
Yeah, well, I drove the last version and I could see that it was great value, but it had some shortcomings, including, in fact, it was
Flaws.
very slow to change gear. That was one of the things I said on it, but they seem to have fixed a lot of it. And the interior looked great, doesn't it? It's bearing in mind it's a cheap car. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
what, £6,000 cheaper than any other electric car I can think of, a proper one anyway. So they've done a really great job on that.
Yeah, I think they've done a great job. We'd love to hear from you, actually. Have any of you listening ordered or are going to order a Dacia Spring? And do let us know why you ordered it. Is it just price, or I think it's a good package. I mean, the fact they offer vehicle to load on that, but you still can't get it on VW Group cars, that's just nuts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Come on, VW. Come on. Okay, so should we move on to the thorny topic of comeback cars? Tumbleweed
We
blowing
must.
through. We must.
Well, you
But
two have seen. Yeah, you two have seen the most controversial, and I think I know what your opinion of that particular car is. So why don't you express
We
to
have. So
people what you
just
think of that
to
car?
fill you in, if you've been, I don't know, cut off from the World Wide Web and the wider social media in general over the last few days, Ford have brought back the Capri. And Fiat have brought back the Panda. Let's just say one of them is more successful than the other, and it's not the Ford. It's been, so they've brought back the Capri name and they have put it on the kind of ID 5 version of the, basically. So it's basically an Explorer that's got a new front and rear end. They haven't even been bothered to change the doors and the wing mirrors. They're still the same as the ones on the Explorer. And it looks nothing like a Capri. So it's very much a car for families. It's a big, flabby, massive SUV, and it's caused a bit of a stir, hasn't it? I've been trawling through comments on social media and on YouTube where we have a walk around video. If you haven't seen it and you feel you do want to expose yourself to it, watch with caution. But it's just generally not gone down that well. What did you think when you saw it, Vic?
Yeah, I struggled to.
The pause says it all.
Much the same as you guys, really. I think it's such a difficult one because I'll put it out there. I like the Mustang Mach-E. I completely understand why lots of people were like, "Oh, it's not a Mustang." I get that. I love the proper original Mustang and the V8 Mustang. I get that, but I always thought the Mustang Mach-E was cool because it was different enough to justify itself, and I got what they were doing with making Mustang a bit of a brand in its own right. Capri, I feel like it's less defined. I mean, it's just a coupe version of the Explorer. And also, I understand that obviously the people who remember the Capri and are nostalgic about it and all that sort of stuff probably aren't the ones that Ford are targeting. I get all of that. But the problem is, it doesn't look anything like a Capri. It doesn't do what a Capri used to do. And I don't really understand why they've had to sort of use that name if the car isn't intended for people who know what it is anyway. So then you kind of feel like it's falling down the gaps in between all the marketing, really. And I mean, I liked the Explorer. I really like the Explorer. I'm sure the Capri is genuinely a good car. But I think the problem is that obviously they've kind of they've basically offended all the people who like the Capri and the people they're targeting. I fear the car isn't wow enough in terms of its styling either to really catch their attention. So I fear that they might have missed the mark with it.
Yeah, it's such a shame with it, really. And I completely agree. I think I said that in the video, is that I have nothing against the car, apart from the fact, yes, it's another big SUV. And they're saying it's a coupe SUV. I'm sorry, there's just not enough coupe on there. It's much more SUV than coupe. It's got it's a big old chunky thing. And they just didn't need to bring back the name. And I think this just goes back to what on earth is Ford's, I don't know, what's its plan around EVs, and why this obsession with bringing back these names from the past and putting them on cars that are nothing like the originals? They don't need to do that. They've got all these amazing names trademarked. Ford's got, reams of them. Just choose a different name, for goodness sake. And the fact that then you get inside, and apart from it's got the 6 o'clock spoke on the steering wheel and sort of these integrated headrests or head restraints. I had a comment that was very cross with me for calling them headrests, not head restraints. And there we go. There's just nothing. It's a Ford Explorer inside. It's just a Ford Explorer. And even that is basically a VW. Well, it's got the bad bits from the Volkswagen, like
I couldn't help but feel like it would at least have been more successful if they'd had the guts to make it a coupe saloon rather than an SUV. And I did ask the designer, Amco Leonards, why they did that, why they made it an SUV, and inevitably, apparently, it's because customers say they want the higher seating position and that more sense of safety, and that's what he said. And that fine, but then people buy the Model 3 in their droves, and Polestar 2, i4 sells well. There's definitely a market out there for those cars. It doesn't have to be an SUV, and I just wish Ford had been a bit braver with it, really.
Yeah, do you think it's anything to do with the fact that they're so limited by the fact that their electric cars are now just happening because of this deal with Volkswagen? So they've basically got this, there's a limit to what they can do because everything underneath is coming from this, the VW platform. And I wonder if that's hampering them as well. Or maybe it's the fact that almost 50% of all the cars that we buy in Europe are SUVs, and actually they're just going, well, that's what people buy. So... But yeah,
I think that's more it. Yeah,
that's probably a bit more it, really. So no, it didn't. But the one comment for me really summed it up. From Truman Show on YouTube, who said it needs to be renamed the Fraud Capri or the Ford Crappy, which I thought just summed up all the comments. And then, of course, there was always the one, wasn't there? I got a brilliant comment. Ford is looking to sell this car to the younger generation, not to nostalgic old ladies. Oh, that's officially the first time I've been called an old lady. I quite like that. Does that mean I can be really cranky and grumpy now? And I was fairly grumpy in that video. But yeah, and again, that's probably a very good point. But I'm just not convinced that the younger generation are going to want a big, massive electric SUV aimed at families either. So that's where that comment falls down, really. Anyway, should we move on to the... So that's a comeback that should have stayed firmly in the history books. Let us know what you think in the comments below if you are watching on YouTube. If you are listening on your streaming service, do drop us an email. We love to hear from you. podcast@electrifying.com. What do you think? Should the Ford Crappy or Capri or the VW Capri or whatever we're calling it now, should that have stayed in the history books? So Tom, talk to us about the Panda, because you love a Panda, don't you?
Well, I do love a Panda. I actually own a Panda, but it's obviously enormously successful for Fiat. It's been around for years, and if you go to Italy, there's a Panda on every corner, isn't there? So they've brought it back as a electric car, but it's called the Grande Panda, so it's bigger. So it's it's just under 4 meters, so slightly smaller than something like a Corsa, but it's based on the same bits underneath as the Citroen EC3 and the Vauxhall Frontera. So it's got that 111 horsepower motor and a 44 kilowatt hour battery, 200-ish mile range. But to make it a bit different, Fiat have added some kind of retro styling bits from the original boxy 1980s Panda, which is the real kind of classic one. Those 4x4 ones are still quite sought after, aren't they? And so it's got those upright lights. It's got some headlamps, which are sort of the same shape. The dashboard kind of resembles it a little bit as well. So it's got this kind of hammock effect that you can put loads of stuff. But it's got loads of room. So it's got plenty of room for 5 and a big boot. And should be around 22 grand for the electric version. One really clever thing it's got, which I really like, is it's got a you open a hatch just underneath the bonnet and the front grille, and it's got a curly charging cable. So it's got a normal charging port like every other car, but do you remember the Twizy had one that was attached to the car and you can plug it in? So you don't have to get it dirty, you don't have to worry about where you're going to put it, you just uncoil it, plug it into your charge point when you go to the shops or wherever, and then it boings back in again once you've finished, and you don't have to do that, where am I going to put it, which I really like.
I do really like that. My thought on that is, do you remember Slinkies?
Yes.
So bear with me, young people listening to this podcast. The Slinky is a metal toy that was a coil that used to go downstairs on its own. Slinkies always stretched and you could never get them back together over time. And my worry with that coil is that over time it would stretch and you'd be forever cramming it back into the compartment at the front, trying to get your coiled cable back in.
Or do you remember the telephone cables? The coiled telephone cables, when you had you were trying to have a conversation in the kitchen while your mum was cooking dinner and you were on the massive long kind of coiled cable and it get all knotted. It always got all knotted and kind of tangled.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's the practical side in us coming out here, Vic. Do either of you two, when you looked at it? So you sent me some sneaky pictures early to have a look at yesterday, didn't you, Tom? And it reminds me of a Hyundai at the front with the lights, the pixelated lights.
Well, pixel lights seem to be the big thing now, aren't they? They're obviously becoming cheaper or something, and allow you to make different shapes. I don't think it's perfect or fantastic. I just think it's going to be a nice, reasonably priced family car with some nice styling things and some clever bits. And I'm sure it'll be fun to drive because it's a Fiat.
It looks cute, and I love the Panda sort of embossed into the side panel, which looks really nice. Got the word Panda, that's nice. And I think the interior does look nice. And also, great, brilliant, £22,000. Yes, please. We will have more of this. As we keep saying, it's great to see so many more affordable EVs coming through. Okay, so that's the comebacks done. Should we go on to some comments? Because we had loads of good comments. Vicky, loads of people again just saying, giving Vicky loads of love. You've got to stop your family and friends, Vicky, emailing and writing into the podcast. Okay?
No, they're on it now. Keep going, guys. Keep going. Come on, we love it.
Lots of lovely comments about Vicky, and yes, we know we love that Vicky's on the gang. There's one here that I want to do. It's for you, Tom. It was Guinness is good for you. It was the handle of this. Is Tom one of those people who goes around switching off lights behind everyone and forgets to put one on when he needs it? Why is he always in the dark? Can someone shed some light on this? I think I think it's a comment on the darkness of your camera and the fact that
yes.
we were talking about ways to save money.
I eat a lot of carrots, so I'm fine in the dark. But yeah, I do have to go around switching off lights all the time for my family. They don't understand.
He is.
It's a dad
If you
thing.
could, if you could only have his lights on during the off-peak hours of 1 till 6 a.m., he would get his whole family to adapt their life cycle. So
Well,
that
I have teenagers, so I think they're only awake between the hours of 1 and 6 a.m. anyway.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of happy customers. We've had a couple of lovely messages this week from TIHIR1. Yes, that's your name. Sorry. So your channel has converted a total petrol head. I collect my ENY1 on Monday. The reviews and the explanations of tech and cars and the quality of your videos is excellent. Thank you, which is really lovely. And then there was a little edit to that review saying that he'd picked it up yesterday. First impressions were really good, especially given that it has had generally quite a lot of poor reviews, but a very happy customer there. Which is good.
Talking of ENY1s, I think he probably bought that on one of the deals that was around a couple of months ago.
Oh, yes.
And those deals are back. So I spotted a £269 deposit, £269 a month. I mean, that's cheap, isn't it? For quite
really cheap.
A nice car.
It's a well-spec'd, comfortable car. Goodness me. Okay. Well, that's
In
a very
fact,
good one.
That is Dacia Spring cheap. That is. I was thinking about that. That's the sort of finance deals they've got on the Spring, isn't it? How about that?
Is it?
Yeah. And because people always ask, there were a few Honda dealers who were doing that, and I've got no affiliation to this company, but that was a John Banks Honda, if anybody wants to. So save your emailing in, contact them.
And then another great podcast. This is from Kuji Kugman. I always look forward to them. You were the reason for me going electric. Well, that's really great. We hope we're honest on this, don't we? Because we do say it warts and all. We don't sugarcoat things, and we've certainly been critical when we've needed to be. But yes, I'm very happy about that. Okay, let's go back on to. Should we go on to some buying advice? So we've had Niall F who has messaged in asking for some buying advice. So thanks for another great podcast. Looking for some expert advice. We're strongly considering upgrading our 15-year-old second car, a diesel, which is used for ferrying our 3 kids around, school runs, training, trips to the shop, etc. We feel your pain. We've driven the Ioniq, the Leaf and the e-Golf. The e-Golf being the favourite so far in terms of how it drives and practicality of boot space. Leaf is very hard to ignore because of used prices there in Ireland. Likely to keep the car for at least 5 years due to limited mileage. So my question is, which one would you buy? Thanks from Niall. Any thoughts, either of you?
I'm not sure I've ever driven an e-Golf, but I can imagine what it's like.
I drove one a long time ago, actually.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
I really like the e-Golf. I always really went back when it was, it was an e-Golf, a Leaf, or a Zoe, basically. I always really rated the e-Golf. So I mean, I have to say, of my choice, I mean, if the problem is here, if the Leaf's better value, then ultimately, if that's your priority, the Leaf is a really good, solid, honest car. So just go with the Leaf. It's going to do the job, isn't it? But I mean, if you value, I have to say, in terms of, I always preferred the Golf in terms of the way it drove and in terms of just sort of interior simplicity, that kind of thing. I really liked the Golf. So I mean, if you value that, then do go for the Golf. And I mean, the Ioniq, the old wind blade, that's a great thing, isn't it? So
it's a good thing.
It's a really good thing. They're all good cars. Honestly, I'd say choose the one that you like and that suits your budget, and you're not going to go wrong with any of them, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm probably agreed with that. Tom, any preference? Well, you're obviously going to go for a Leaf because you always choose the Leaf.
I would go for a Leaf, but I can understand why people want to go for the Ioniq. When we were looking at second-hand cars to replace our Leaf, my wife said I couldn't have one of those because someone would climb into it thinking it's an Uber. I don't know if that's a problem everywhere or just around here, but those Ioniqs are used. It's either those or Priuses, isn't it?
Here in central London, it is like literally Ioniq City. Absolutely. But, it's still a really good car. So we recommend any of them, I think. Let us know what you choose. So one from John Moying. A big thank you for your podcasts. Always informative and well presented. Why, thank you, John. Question for you. We currently have a Mercedes A-Class hybrid saloon coming up to 3 years old. I would like to go fully electric, but we have specific requirements. We live in London have a flat in at Devon, a journey of 250 miles. Got a charger at home and in the car park at the flat, which is great for charging at reasonable cost. Can you recommend an electric car that would travel the 250 miles without the need to stop and charge? On another point, I do like a soft ride. Before the A-Class, we had the E-Class with full air suspension. So no idea about budget there. So I guess we could perhaps come up with a couple in different budgets. But I mean, that 250-mile range, goodness me, there are so many cars that will do that now. Even in winter, when we know that ranges drop off. I mean, that, looking at the Scenic, as we've already talked about, that range it's a very efficient car, that. And I would imagine that even with drop off in winter, you're going to be getting well over 250 miles out of that.
Mm. I'm a bit obsessed with ride quality, and because I'm getting old, I prefer it to almost anything else in a car. And there are a couple that spring to mind. The first is that Cupra Born, I always thought rode remarkably well for a sportier car, and that's quite good value. And a bigger battery version will do 250 miles easily on a charge.
Yeah.
The other one, if you can wait a bit, is I drove that prototype Skoda Karoq. No, Elroq.
Oh yeah. Elroq, yeah.
Yeah, that has obviously been tuned for comfort more than sportiness, and it was really nice. The ride on sort of broken roads and over speed bumps and things was lovely. And of course, it's got plenty of room. So if he's coming out of an A-Class, that will seem quite big, I think. The other one that everybody else hates, and it's one of those cars that I quite like, it's a Mercedes EQA. I think that rides quite nicely, but everybody else hates it.
I don't hate it. I'm just not a massive fan of just generally. I think I'm massively generalising here, but I think Mercedes interiors for me are just not great at the moment. They just feel a bit curiously over the top, but dated all at the same time. And I don't
they are
think
a bit chintzy, yeah,
very chintzy. And I don't think they're nailing EVs yet in the way that, say, BMW or Audi or brands like Kia are doing as well. Vicky, anything to throw into the list there of cars that would be good for that kind of journey?
Without wishing to become Electrifying's official ID7 correspondent, I would like to put out something for the ID7 because I'm just loving it. I think it's really comfy, really refined, and I know it's quite expensive, really, but if you want to go for sort of a nearly new one or something, I think you're probably not far off the price of a new A-Class PHEV plug-in hybrid. So don't know what the budget is, but if you can stretch to the ID7, do consider it because it's a great long-distance tourer for range and for comfort. So I'm really enjoying it for that.
And if you're considering the ID7 as the official cheerleader for the Skoda Enyaq on the Electrifying team, may I suggest that you should also cast your eye over the Skoda Enyaq, particularly if you're regularly doing a lot of long journeys, because it has the most massive boot and the most practical boot because it's just big and square and it's almost like an estate. And I love that car. But in terms of ride, it rides really well. It's got a lovely ride quality about that car.
Well, look, here's something else that I thought about for this because what immediately came to my mind as well, if you want a lower cost option, is maybe a used Kia e-Niro, the first generation, because they were really efficient.
Yeah.
They will do 250 miles in the real world. You can get them for a good price now. 250 miles, I did a lot of miles in one of those, and they do pretty reliably do 250 miles. You might be just pushing it a bit in winter, I have to say. You might need a bit of a sort of peace of mind, sort of splash and dash halfway through your journey. But I mean, they do that kind of mileage pretty well in the summer. So and they're great value. So I mean, if you want, and they're comfy and really lovely to drive. So if you're looking for a more affordable option, I would definitely vote for that too. That's a good one.
I'm just going to chuck in as well one of our forgotten heroes from last week, and we're going to move on to that in a second because we've had loads of suggestions for forgotten hero cars. The Kia Soul, because that's on runoff at the moment. Deals around on that, and it's a very, very, very comfortable, well-equipped car. And again, in my experiences with that car, I've always found it to be very efficient. So could well be seeing if, because that car's it's going to be no more because of the arrival of the Kia EV3, you might be worth seeing you can get some deals on one of those. Right then, should we move on? Let's move on to, we had loads of people. We had our forgotten cars. Do you remember we talked about the unsung heroes, the cars that we think should get a bit more love? So should we take unsung heroes? Should we take one each? Should we rattle through them?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with Roger Finch 7651, who said the e-Golf is my unsung hero, efficient in anything, and it is a Golf. So that actually could be an answer to you, Niall, who was considering an e-Golf for potentially a new car. Okay, anybody else want to pick some unsung heroes?
Well, Snoop Britton agrees and says e-Golf for unsung hero, drives beautifully, cheap, well built, doesn't look like a bloated mess. IV3 ball. Perhaps. But also, Phil Galvin says unsung hero has to be the Smart 4.2. Perfect for small families with enough range without taking public transport, cheap to buy secondhand, and space for all the shopping. Now, I drove a Smart 4.2 electric, and it's one of the most stressful things I ever did.
Why?
Because I took it out for a little drive, which was like an hour long. And then I looked down at the range just thinking, I'll see what it is now. And it's like 17 miles. And the range back to base was like 19. So I had to find a charger, and it didn't DC charge. It only does AC. So I had to sit there and have a sandwich and play Angry Birds or something on my phone until it had enough miles to get it back to the base. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Now,
Oh, Lord.
of course, if you're in cities, it's not such a problem, but I didn't go very far and just thought, no, this isn't great.
Oh gosh. Okay. Right. Well, maybe that's not Tom's unsung hero though, even if it is yours, Phil. Another shout out here for the original 28 kilowatt hour Ionic. That's my unsung hero. A very well efficient car and well equipped from Ardan 4299. A lot of love for the Kia Soul. Arman Line 2005. The Kia Soul is our unsung hero. We're getting one while we can. A Arc Cornwall unsung hero would be the Kia Soul. Do you want to take a couple, Vic?
Yeah, I was going to say actually, Steve Powell. I'm with you. Unsung hero would have to go to a second-hand I-Pace. I'm so tempted by a second-hand I-Pace. I hope to buy one day. I love them. Such a gorgeous car, an amazing value now. Get a high-spec model which costs somebody £75,000 to £85,000 and can now be had for some teens of thousands, says Steve. Real driver's car and practical to boot. I still rate the I-Pace as one of the best driving electric cars out there, even today. I think they just absolutely nailed the handling and ride. If you went for small wheels on that car, it's a fantastic car. Great use by.
It is. I completely agree. I would say it's still the best driving electric car, maybe on a par with, I don't know, maybe BMW i4, which I do like a lot to drive.
Well,
but
you've got to give it to Taycan, but that's obviously another level. But
that's
you
true.
know,
Yes,
yeah,
it's true. But it's fabulous. It just shows, great design. And Mike Cross, who at the time was head of driving dynamics at Jaguar Land Rover, just an absolute genius with what he did with cars, and it was fabulous. And it just makes me sad to see where Jaguar have not gone with that, because they had such an amazing car there. Okay, should we just do okay, let's just do one more. Jules Morgan 7032. As Tesla hardly gets a mention on Electrifying, I'm going to nominate them as my unsung hero. They're offering 0% interest PCP on new Model 3s at the moment. Enjoying the channel. Keep up the good work, Jules. Do we not mention Tesla a lot? Maybe just because we're talking about new stuff all the time, aren't we?
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to try reading some of the reviews, Jules? Because I mentioned Tesla as a rival in almost every review that I write ever on Electrifying. Everything is a rival for a Tesla Model Y or a Model 3, as far as I can tell. I think it's insane.
It is pretty much the benchmark car. And I think on the point that we do love Tesla here at Electrifying, we should wrap up this episode of the Kilowatt Half Hour, because as always, we've gone over the half hour. We are going to have to think about renaming it, aren't we? Please do send us your car buying questions. Let us know what you think, what's on your mind about cars at the minute. You can do that in the comments below, or you can drop us an email, which is podcast@electrifying.com. We'll make a comeback next week, and it won't be in the style of the Capri. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.